We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by our good friends at MyBookie. And today on the show, I'm bringing all you Georgia diehards everything you need to know about Georgia's road trip to Starkville this weekend to take on the SEC's other Bulldogs in a very tricky trap game spot. So if you're a Georgia diehard, guys, we're going to have a lot of fun today, but go ahead, subscribe right now, turn those notifications on. Got a ton of content coming your way the rest of this season and beyond, designed for all you diehards. So subscribe, like, comment. Love to hear from you guys. Thank you for all of your support. But all right, last weekend, we got by the Florida game, way too close for comfort, but 24-20, dogs on top. Ultimately, that's all that matters. But guys, we have no time to sit back and take a breather. It's now all eyes on Mississippi State, who at 5-4, let's be real, is not exactly a juggernaut. I don't want to try to sell you on the fact that Mississippi State, or this idea that Mississippi State is some team that's going to go out and push the best teams in the country on a consistent basis. That's not who this team is, but they are much improved over where they have been in recent years, certainly from where they were a year ago, which they were pretty clearly the worst team in the SEC. Got a little bit better SEC some progress, but throughout most of last year, that was the worst team in the SEC with a coaching change, bringing in Jeff Levy and trying to establish his culture, his offense, his system, all those things. But they are much better this year. They are not at Georgia's level, but this is a Mississippi State team that at home is certainly capable of knocking off a team like Georgia of that caliber if that team, in this case being Georgia, comes in kind of sleepwalking through this game, not taking it seriously. And of course, I would love to believe that under Kirby Smart, that's not going to happen. But we're talking about 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, guys. Things like that happen. You see it week in, week out in college football. So yes, this game, while Mississippi State is not on Georgia's level per se, they are a capable team, which is why this game has my full attention here a couple of days ahead of Saturday. So today I'm going to preview this, I think, a tricky road trip to Starkville using the same countdown format that I do every single week here on this channel. If you're new to the channel, guys, it's real simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 names to know from this Mississippi State roster. Just some names that you Georgia diehards should be familiar with coming to this game. I'm going to give you 4 stats that matter, that kind of set the stage for this game, kind of tell the story of this matchup. I'm going to give you 3 reasons to like Georgia's chances to go into Starkville and come out with another victory. But I'm also going to flip it over and give you 2 causes for concern, and I'll wrap things up with 1 player from the Georgia team to watch, a guy I think could have a big game for the Dogs on Saturday. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and dive in. We do have a lot to talk about today. Off the top here, the first player to know from this Mississippi State roster is quarterback Blake Shapen. I always start with the quarterback because it is the most important position on any football team. And this guy has played a lot of football at the Power 4 level. He's a 24-year-old, fifth-year senior. Started his career at Baylor, started there for a couple of years, ends up transferring to Mississippi State prior to last year. Was their starter to open the season and was actually playing a pretty solid level. Got hurt early in the year in the first couple of games and was out for the rest of the year. They played Michael Van Buren, who was a freshman quarterback last year, was a big part of why they struggled as much as they did last year. One of the many reasons why they struggled as much as they did last year. But Shapen is back, and he's been healthy all year long. He's averaging 238 passing yards a game, completing 65% of his passes, 8.4 yards per attempt. So there's some explosiveness in this Mississippi State passing attack. 15 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He's also a solid athlete, not a dynamic athlete, but a solid athlete that they were absolutely willing to use in the design QB run game. I don't want to say they designed a lot for him in the QB run game, but they will use him in that regard. He's capable of scrambling. He can extend plays. Like, this is a guy that has some mobility. You have to be aware of that when you play this Mississippi State team. So you got to start with the opposing quarterback. Blake Shapen, good veteran quarterback. Maybe not elite, but a really solid guy. He's played a ton of football, seen a lot of things over his years at the college level. Number 2, second player to know here, we've got wide receiver Brennan Thompson, who, by the way, guys, is a former top 75 national recruit coming to high school a couple years back. Started his career at Oklahoma, another transfer. A lot of guys on this team. That's one of the themes here. Transfers in this Mississippi State program coming over when Jeff Levy got the job last year. Some guys coming in this year as well. But Brennan Thompson is a new guy, was on the team last year, was at Oklahoma. Never really did all that much at Oklahoma. didn't get as many opportunities as he would have liked, which is why he transferred over to Mississippi State. And he's had a really, really good year for the Bizarro Dogs. 41 catches, a team high, 716 yards receiving, 17 and a half yards per catch. So this guy is an explosive play waiting to happen for Mississippi State. 6 touchdowns on the year. He's a small guy. He's not a big receiver, 5'9", 170. They do play him primarily on the outside because Anthony Evans, the guy we're going to get to in a minute, plays more so in the slot than Thompson does. They'll move him inside at times, but he is more of an outside guy, even though he's a smaller 5'9", 170 dude. But his game is speed, guys. He's a 10-2, 100-meter guy, one of the faster guys in college football. When you watch them play, you hear the announcers say, "Oh, he's the fastest guy in college football." I don't know if he's the fastest guy, but he can flat out fly. I mean, he's the kind of guy, you line him up outside, he will just straight up run past your corners. Like, he'll just run past the entire defense, beat you over the top, and if Shapen puts it on the money, you got an explosive play waiting to happen. That's kind of how they end up beating Arizona State going back. It was that week 3, early in the year. They were kind of controlling that game. Arizona State comes back in the second half, takes the lead, and late in the game, Brent Thompson gets loose down the field, creates an explosive play, and they end up winning the football game. So he is a big play threat waiting to happen every single time this dude is on the field. Now, his running mate at the receiver position is a guy that Georgia fans, I wouldn't say that we're very familiar with because he actually never really played that much in Georgia. But he was on the Georgia roster for a couple of years. A guy that coming in last year, I had some very high hopes for. A guy I thought that could give us maybe some punch in our passing game last year. Never really happened. Very inconsistent playing time. But Anthony Evans, you know the name, might not know the game all that much. Again, we didn't see him play that much. But this is a talented receiver, a very athletic, explosive receiver in his own right. A little bigger than Thompson, 5'11", 180 pounds. He actually leads the team in receptions from that slot, primarily a slot receiver position. 52 catches, 653 yards, 12.6 yards per catch. Now, that's not as explosive as Thompson, but don't get me wrong, guys. Evans is very much capable of generating explosive plays in his own right. He himself is a 10-to 700-meter guy coming out of high school, 4 touchdowns on the year. So that's a really strong, explosive 1-2 punch for Mississippi State at the receiver position. And then you got 2 running backs that I think are both really, really good backs. The guy I'm going to go with right now, the first one here, because he's leading the team in rushing right now, is a transfer from South Alabama. I remember watching him last year as a freshman at South Alabama. Yes, I'm a sicko. I watch even G5 football on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Absolutely, I do. South Alabama was pretty good last year. Gio Lopez, quarterback. He's now in North Carolina. Obviously not going great for him. But Bothwell's having a solid year. He's been banged up at times for Mississippi State this year. He's back. He's healthy. He's a bigger back, 5'10", 230, but has good athleticism for a guy that's 230, kind of that bigger body size. Kind of reminds me a little bit shorter than Jaden Ball, but kind of that type of running back. He's got 490 yards rushing on the year, but that's a little misleading as he has been banged up for a number of games. Missed a couple of games, 5.1 yards per carry, so he's biting off some yards, guys, and 6 touchdowns on the year. And then his running mate, kind of a 1-2 punch in the backfield. The 5th player note here for this Mississippi State football team is Devon Booth, who, by the way, was actually State's leading rusher a year ago. Was actually, in my opinion, was one of the better running backs in the SEC last year when he was healthy, playing on a really bad football team. He really impressed me last year. Now, with Bothwell coming over, his carries have been cut down, but he's still right there. He's played in more games than Bothwell has this year. 475 yards rushing, only 4.2 yards per attempt, but he's still a capable back. 7 touchdowns on the year. So actually leads the team in rushing touchdowns. Not the same style back. He's a little bit more athletic, a little faster than Bothwell. Not as powerful, not as big. 5'10", 205. But both those guys are very capable of biting off chunk yards and hurting a defense. I know Georgia's been really good against the run. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But those 2 guys can absolutely run the rock. So those are 5 names to note from this Mississippi State football team. Moving into the next category here, guys, let's go with 4 stats that matter. So if you noticed, with those 5 players I just gave you, 5 players to know from this Mississippi State roster, not a single one was from the state defense. That was not an accident, guys. Usually I try to spread the love, right? Give you guys some offensive players, give you some impact defensive guys. I didn't do that this week for a reason, guys, because Mississippi State just doesn't really have anyone on defense that scares you. That you look at and you say, oh my God, how are we going to plan for this guy? Like, we gotta have a plan for him. Got to watch out for this guy. He's capable of disrupting everything that we do. They don't really have a guy like that. They are straight up horrific on the defensive side of the football. There's no getting around it, guys. Like, they're a capable offense, which we're going to get to, but defensively, I don't think it's a stretch to call them an outright train wreck. That's what they are, guys. They're going to 451 total yards a game against SEC competition. And yes, I'm just going with SEC competition because, yeah, that's what Georgia is, an SEC team, right? 451 yards a game against SEC teams. That is the worst among any team in the league, guys. There's no other team in the league, including Arkansas. And if you watch them play, you know how bad the Hogs are on defense this year. Even Arkansas is giving up fewer yards per game against SEC opponents than this Mississippi State defense is, guys. They're giving up over 6 yards a play against SEC opponents. I'm not a math guy. Those guys who know me, been around a long time here on this channel, you know I'm not a math guy, but even I can do that. 6 yards plus 6 yards, that's 12 yards. That's 2 plays a first down on average. That's what this Mississippi State team is doing against SEC competition. Again, as we all know, Georgia is an SEC opponent. So again, there's a reason why I did not include any defensive players on that list of 5 players. No, they just don't really have any standout defensive guys. They just don't, guys, since they're not good on that side of the ball. Now, specifically, where do they really struggle defensively? That brings me to my second stat that matters here. Mississippi State is giving up the second most rushing yards per game in the SEC. They're 95th nationally in rushing yards per game allowed, giving up 182 rushing yards per game against SEC competition. And again, why am I using SEC competition? Because that's what Georgia is. They're giving 182 yards a game on the ground, guys. They are getting gashed. They've given up 200 plus yards. I think it's 210 plus yards 4 different times this season. So they don't defend the pass well either, guys. Where they really struggle is stopping the run. In fact, going back and watching their games this season in preparation for this episode, giving you guys everything you need to know about this game, it's baffling to me why some of the opponents that they have played this year did not try to run the ball more. Because whenever you try to run the football, you get consistent movement up front against that Mississippi State defensive front because they cannot hold the point of attack, guys. And when I see teams like Tennessee, for example, they went away from running the ball in the second half of that game. I'm saying, like, why? Why would you stop running the football? I know, like, Tennessee, you got great receivers, you got a quarterback, you can create explosive plays, and they do a good job of that. One of the most explosive offenses in the country, sure, all that. But Tennessee could have run the ball at will in the second half of that game back, what was that, like, first 4 or 5 weeks of this season. I think it was the Mississippi State's first SEC game of the year. And what happened? That game goes into overtime. That game had no business going overtime, guys. But Tennessee didn't really exploit that pretty obvious weakness, in my opinion, of that Mississippi State rush defense. So that's something very much to keep an eye on here in this game. Now, the Mississippi State offense, we're gonna dive into that here a little bit more in detail with the next category. I want to save it for that. But let's just suffice it to say the Mississippi State offense is clearly the better side of the ball for this Mississippi State football team. I would caution you, though, because I see a lot of people out there right now, guys, a lot of people in Georgia fan base saying, oh, my God, how are we going to stop this Mississippi State offense? How many points is Georgia going to have to score? They're good on offense. They absolutely have some explosive playmakers. We went through those guys with Shapen at quarterback, veteran, been around a long time, Thompson, Anthony Evans, 2 good backs. Yes, they are a very capable, very good offensive football team. Jeff Levy, offensive-minded coach, absolutely. But they aren't a particularly efficient offense. What they are is an explosive offense. Down by down, they aren't really all that efficient, but they can generate explosive plays. And that's what saves them, guys. We have guys like Brennan Thompson, Anthony Evans on the outside. You can create those explosive plays. So right now, guys, Mississippi State is top 30 nationally in plays of both 20 or more yards and plays of 30 more yards. They're top 10 nationally. I think number 7 nationally right now in place of 40 or more yards. So yes, that is how they generate points, guys. They create explosive plays and they hit those explosive plays when they get opportunity. So that's what you got to be careful here for, guys. You've got to limit the explosive plays when you play this Mississippi State team. Easier said than done. But while they are explosive, I would also caution you guys, they are not a very efficient team. We'll get that more here in just a second. And finally, another misnomer about this Mississippi State offense. In fact, I was just reading somebody who covers the Georgia beat. I guess a beat writer for Georgia. And they were talking about this game, like, oh man, Mississippi State, they throw the ball all over the place. That's all they do. They just throw the football. And I'm like, have you ever actually watched Mississippi State play this year? Like, yeah, if you watch the highlights, all you see are them creating explosive plays down the field. Sure, like that stands out if you're just watching highlights, if you're box score watching. But if you really watch the games, you would know this is not a team that throws the ball down by down. This is not a Mike Leach Mississippi State offense, guys. This is not an air raid offense. That's not what this is. This is an offense under Jeff Levy that is extraordinarily similar to the Tennessee offense under Josh Heupel. Not as much this year as Tennessee. They've evolved offensively this year, but the first several years at Tennessee, what Josh Heupel's put out there offensively, that's kind of what you're going to see from Mississippi State. If you go back and you trace Jeff Levy's background, he was at Baylor when Art Briles was there, right? Which is essentially what the Tennessee offense, Josh Heupel's offense was. It's the deep option offense, right? So he was at Baylor. He was actually the offensive coordinator with Josh Heupel at UCF, brought some of that deep option Baylor Art Briles offense to Ole Miss. He was the coordinator there. So Ole Miss, like what they run is kind of a hybrid of this Art Briles Baylor offense and like West Coast stuff and some air raid stuff. It's kind of a hybridization of all those different offensive systems, but it certainly got some of the deep option Art Briles stuff that Jeff Levy brought there. And now he's brought it to Starkville. And what they want to do, guys, and look, I know that if you've been with this podcast for a long time, you've been listening to me for a while, you've heard me talk about the Tennessee offense for years and years and years now. I've broken it down many, many times. But just to make it real quick and sweet here for you guys, what they want to do is create vertical kill shots in the passing game with their speedy wide receivers. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to generate those explosive passing plays. But it's how they do that that's different than what I think the average fan thinks, right? Because for everyone's like, man, Tennessee they just throw the football all over the place. Like, yeah, again, they have some high profile vertical passing plays, explosive plays, but they generate those plays by committing to running the football against light boxes. That's how they generate the one-on-one looks. They'll run the football against light boxes over and over and over again until eventually you get tired of death by 1,000 paper cuts. And what do? You start rolling bodies in the box. You get safeties in the box. Now you have some single high looks. You get some more one-on-one looks on the outside. Now you can generate those one-on-one kill shots that create those explosive passing plays for Tennessee and now Mississippi State. That is, in a nutshell, what they want to do. But to get those kill shots in the passing game, they've got to commit to running the football. So if you look at their splits, guys, offensively, Mississippi State is not some pass-happy Mike Leach air raid offense. They run the ball 58% of the time this season. Guys, that's actually not by much, but ever so slightly more than Georgia runs the ball. And if you watch Georgia play this year, you'd probably say that Georgia's a run-first team, right? Like, yes, we will throw the football. We'll try and create some play-action shots down the field. Of course, we'll take our shots. But first and foremost, we want to establish the run this year. And that is what Mississippi State does, guys. If you give them a light box, which you kind of have to do a lot of times, if you want to defend their receiver splits and that way they spread you out, and if you give them a light box, they are going to run it time and time and time again. They'll use some split zone stuff. They'll run some counter. They'll run some power. They'll run some QB run game. But if you give them a light box, they are committed to running the football. So don't go into this game with this mindset that you're going to see Mississippi State throw the ball 60 times this game. That is not going to happen, like unless we get up by 40 and they just got to throw the ball every snap. But outside of a situation like that, they are going to be committed to running the football. So be ready for that. All right. Moving on here, guys, let's go to 3 reasons to like Georgia's chances in this matchup against Mississippi State. And number 1, all right, now this is what I held for this segment right here. The Georgia offense. Guys, I know you might not think this. I know that's not the perception. I know this is not the perception out there. This is not the narrative. But if you actually watch these two teams play, if you actually peel back the layers and you look at the numbers, the Georgia offense is better than the Mississippi State offense. And the reason I think this is important, the reason why I have this listed as one of my reasons to like Georgia's chances, because what I continue to hear since that Florida game went final, guys, my eye has turned towards this game in like 10 minutes of beating Florida on Saturday. But the biggest thing I have heard from people in the aftermath of that Florida game, as people are now starting to turn their attention towards this game in Starkville over the weekend, is some variation of, oh my God, I don't know how we're possibly going to stop this Mississippi State offense. They're going to throw the ball all over us. How are we possibly going to score enough points to keep up with this Mississippi State offense? I keep hearing some variation of that. But guys, when you look at the numbers here, the Mississippi State offense is simply not as good as the Georgia offense. It's that simple, guys. Georgia has Georgia averages more yards per play. Georgia averages more yards per game. Georgia averages more yards per play against SEC opponents. Georgia averages more yards per game against SEC opponents. Georgia has a better offensive efficiency, opponent adjusted offensive efficiency. By the way, Georgia's number one in the country in adjusted opponent offensive or opponent adjusted offensive efficiency according to the FEI rankings. Mississippi State's not bad, but they're like, I think they're 32 in the FEI ratings right now with their offensive efficiency. In fact, if you don't adjust for opponent, Georgia's still like top 15, number 11 nationally when you don't adjust for opponent with offensive efficiency. Mississippi State's all the way down in the 60s, guys, all in the 60s against SEC teams. Georgia is averaging more points per game than Mississippi State is. Those are the facts, guys. So again, I'm not telling you Mississippi State's offense isn't good. Mississippi State's offense is good. They are capable of giving Georgia some troubles, of giving us fits. Absolutely, they are. They have two awesome, dynamic, explosive receivers, a veteran quarterback who's seen a lot of football, and two, I think, really good running backs. They have weapons, and they have an offensive-minded coach that's done a good job coordinating offenses wherever he's gone. All right? They are good on offense. However, Georgia has been better all year long against arguably a more difficult schedule. Arguably. Georgia, yes, we played Florida. They're not good. Kentucky's not good. But guys, Mississippi State, they haven't played Alabama. Yeah, they played A&M, but they played Arkansas. They played Auburn, just like Georgia has. I mean, guys, the splits here aren't all that different. We look at Georgia's offensive numbers and Mississippi State's offensive numbers. I'm not saying that Georgia's like far and away clearly the better offense, but the numbers tell you that Georgia is slightly better than Mississippi State offensively. So the reason I include that as one of my reasons to like Georgia's chances in this game is that if the primary reason you are concerned about this game, one of the leading reasons you see this as a trap game is that, oh my God, how is Georgia going to stop the Mississippi State offense? You need to start asking yourself the inverse of that question. Oh my God, how is Mississippi State going to stop the Georgia offense? Because Mississippi State offense is clearly the best part of that team. But the Georgia offense is at the very least the equal and again statistically slightly better in almost every category, almost across the board, than this Mississippi State offense. So if you're worried about Mississippi State and Georgia being able to stop them, you also have to be worried about Mississippi State stopping the Georgia offense. And when you look at the matchup specifically, guys, this Georgia offense against the Mississippi State defense, who I've already established is very, very bad, specifically on the ground, Georgia once again has an overwhelming advantage in a game against an opponent who does not stop the run well. I waxed poetic about this leading up to the Ole Miss game. A lot of people didn't feel good about Georgia's chances in that game. That was a very popular upset pick. And I told you guys, look, Ole Miss is really explosive, and that they're going to challenge us. Absolutely, it's going to be a challenge to limit their explosive plays and stop them from scoring. They're a very, very good offense, but they can't stop the run to save their life. And that's one thing Georgia's done really well offensively all year is run the football. I thought we would have success running the ball against Ole Miss. I thought that was I told you guys it was the biggest matchup advantage for either team in that game, and it ended up working out that way. I'm gonna say the exact same thing here, guys. As bad as Ole Miss was on the ground, and they are bad stopping the run, Mississippi State, believe it or not, is actually worse. They've given up 239 or more yards 3 times this year, guys, against Power 4 opponents. That is worse than Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not good stopping the run, but Mississippi State's worse. And you saw what we were able to do to Ole Miss. Guys, we put up 227 yards rushing on Alabama. Now, they're not good stopping the run either, but we put up 227 on them. We put up 198 on Tennessee. Also not great stopping the run, but we put up about 2 bills on them. We put up 221 on Ole Miss. And all 3 of those games, guys, we put up those numbers with a very banged-up offensive line. And now the Georgia offensive line is healthy, going against what I would argue is the worst rush defense that we have seen to date. What do we do best offensively? We run the football. That's what we do best offensively. That is the identity of this Georgia offense. It wasn't last year. We've gotten back to old school Georgia football, and we can run the ball down your throat. And this is the worst rush defense that we have seen all year long. This is an overwhelming matchup advantage for Georgia in this game. Just like the Ole Miss game, I think it's the single biggest matchup advantage for either team in this game. All right, and that brings me to the third reason to like Georgia's chances here in this game. So as I talked about a little bit earlier, going back to some of the stats that matter, with Mississippi State being a run-heavy team, 58% of the time, guys, they run the football. Ever so slightly more than Georgia does. And again, the reason they do that is because just like Tennessee, tradition under Josh Heupel, and going back to Josh Heupel's years at UCF and at Missouri before that, They're trying to create kill shots in the vertical passing game. That's what their offense is designed to do. They're trying to create those plays. But just like Tennessee, traditionally, Josh Heupel, not as much this year. They've evolved a little bit this year. But just like Tennessee, they use the run game to get those favorable looks. They create those one-on-one shots. And just like when you play Tennessee traditionally, you have to be able, if you want to stop their offense. The reason Georgia held Tennessee to no more than 17 points every time they played a Josh Heupel Tennessee team up until this year is because Georgia was good enough in the front six to stop Tennessee's run game, to limit the Tennessee run game effectively with a light box. Why would Tennessee routinely drop 40, 50 burgers on just about everybody else they played in the SEC? Because most teams in the SEC and everyone else that they played were not good enough to stop the run with light boxes, with even numbers in the box. Georgia was, and that's why Tennessee for years could not score more than 17 points against Georgia. It's that simple, guys. So what do you have to do to limit this Mississippi State offense? You have to be able to stop the run, specifically with light boxes. Why? Why does that matter? Because if you can stop the run with even numbers, with light boxes, without having to roll safeties in the box to get numbers against the run game, that allows you to play with a too high safety shell. If you're playing a too high safety shell, you're going to give safety help over the top to those cornerbacks, and you're going to limit the one-on-one looks that the Tennessee offense was for years, and still is to a degree, and certainly this Mississippi State offense still is trying to create those vertical kill shots down the field. And when you look at what Georgia's done well defensively, not everything. Like, we cannot get after the passer to save our lives. We're one of the 5 worst teams in all of college football rushing the passer. They're in generating sacks. We have 8 sacks on the year, guys, through 9 games. Or what? They're 8 games now, right? 8 sacks. 8 sacks on the year. That's crazy talk. There's only one Power 4 team that has fewer sacks on the year than we do. That's insane. So we're not elite in every aspect of our defense. But there's one area where we have been, I would say, borderline elite. And I tell you guys this pretty much every week because it's the one calling card we have defensively, is we stop the run. That's what this Georgia team does, guys. We run the football well, and we stop the run well. We're only giving up 94 rushing yards a game. Against SEC opponents, we're giving up 105 yards a game on the ground, only 3.3 yards per rush. We are top 15 nationally in both rush defense and yards per rush allowed. So you have to like those numbers, guys. I do think Mississippi State is a capable running attack. Again, just like Tennessee, they have these wide splits. It makes it hard to get safety help in the box, get corner help in the box. Like, you really have to be efficient stopping the run with a light box. You have to be able to do that. But I think Georgia has the front and the linebackers to be able to do that, and that which will allow us to play that too high safety shell and limit those explosive play opportunities that Mississippi State is trying to create. Guys, you go back to last week against Arkansas. I don't know how many of you watched that game, but guys, they only ran the ball for 106 yards and 2.8 yards per rush a week ago against Arkansas. Now, why do I bring that up? Like, who cares? Arkansas sucks, right? Well, this is why it matters, guys. 106 rushing yards against Arkansas, 2.8 yards per rush. Guys, Arkansas is absolutely dreadful against the run defensively. They have not given up fewer than 210 rushing yards a game over the last 5 games, guys. Not less than 210 yards in any single game over the last 5 games prior to playing Mississippi State a week ago. Guys, in fact, those 5 games prior to playing Mississippi State last week, Arkansas was giving up an average of 242 rushing yards a game, giving up 6 yards a rush. And Mississippi State only ran for 106 and 2.8 yards per rush, and they had both backs back and healthy. That's got to be concerning if you're a Mississippi State fan looking at this matchup with how good Georgia is stopping the run and knowing that if Georgia can limit your run game with a light box, then you're going to have a really hard time generating those explosive plays that you're going to need to generate if you have any hope of pulling this upset in this admittedly trap game type spot. Now, Georgia can't blow coverages, even if you can stop the run with even numbers in a light box. If you blow coverage in the back end, like we saw a couple times last week against Florida, that almost cost us the game, well, then all bets are off. So don't blow coverages, but I do like Georgia's ability to stop the Mississippi State run game, at least limit the Mississippi State run game, limit its effectiveness with a light box, because that's what Georgia's done all year long. That's the one thing, the one area where the Georgia defense has been truly, if not elite, borderline elite all year long. So you got to love that matchup there for the Dogs. All right, flip things over here, guys. I do have 2 causes for concern here. The first one is obvious. I know a lot of you are of the same mind here. Now, I asked myself, like, 'cause everyone keeps calling this a trap game. And I myself, like, immediately after the 40, I'm like, oh my God, guys, like, this is a quintessential trap game because you've got it sandwiched between a rivalry game against Florida. I know Florida's not great, but it's a rivalry game, big matchup, Jacksonville, neutral site, all the pageantry around that game, of course, right? And then you got Texas looming the following week. And in between those two games, big time premier programs for Georgia to play. You have little old Mississippi State here, who, by the way, last week just ended an 18-game SEC losing streak. So certainly it's easy to overlook them. It's on the road, a sleepy 11 a.m. kickoff. It has all the makings of a quintessential trap game. Certainly it does. However, one of the things I've been kind of working through myself is like, is it really a trap game if everyone looks at it and knows it's a trap game? Like, can you really call it a trap game, or is a trap game the game you don't really see coming? I don't know. Maybe the trap game idea, like it's played out too much now, but there are legitimate reasons to be concerned about Georgia's mindset coming to this game. Now, when you have Kirby Smart, again, I want to believe, as detail oriented, as demanding as Kirby is, as conscientious as he is about these things, as aware as he is about these things. You saw him his post game uh, breakdown with the team in the locker room after the Florida game. Like, he immediately starts talking about Mississippi State. Like, he knows, he sees it, he's aware of these things. So you want to believe that Georgia won't fall victim to that. But it's college football, guys. You see it time in and time out, week in and week out, guys. It happens all the time in college football. When you talk about guys that are between 18, 21, 22 years old, inevitably, when you have a big game looming, you just got done with the big game, and it was a tight, hard-fought, emotional game against Florida, you want to take a deep breath, take a breather, and then have your eyes a little bit like peeking ahead towards Texas, right? The team that you beat twice last year, you beat them the SEC championship game. They're not as great, not as good this year, but they're still a good team, still in college football playoff contention, to be a big primetime game. Like, it's natural to want to look ahead to that. So you've got to keep your focus on the moment. You cannot be caught looking ahead. You cannot be caught sleeping. Now, I will say, I've seen a lot of people throw out this notion like, oh, it's a 11 a.m. local kick in Mississippi. Like that's a tricky spot for Georgia. I actually like the fact that it's an 11 a.m. kick. Usually, what that means is that's a sleepier home crowd. Now they're going to be jacked up because it's Georgia coming to town, right? And like they're better this year. They just won their first SEC game in a couple of years last week, and they're better this year, certainly. But it's certainly gonna be a sleepier crowd at 11 a.m. local than it would be at like 7 p.m. I'd much rather be an early game if you're the road team than it'd be a night game. So the game time, I think, is the best case scenario for Georgia, but it is a tricky spot coming out of the emotional game against Florida, rivalry game, and you have Texas looming at home next week. Big game, highly anticipated. People have been looking forward to that game for a long time. So keep your eye on the prize. Stay in the moment. If we do that, we'll be okay. We're talking about young players, guys. It's certainly something to be aware of. It is something to, I don't want to say be freaking out about, but it's certainly something that we need to be very aware of heading into this match. And I know that our coaches at this. So hopefully, guys get the message this week during practice. And then finally, guys, here, my second cause for concern from a more X and O standpoint. I'm going to go back to what we talked about earlier with the Mississippi State offense not being especially efficient. They're not on a down by down basis, unadjusted for opponent. They're like in the 60s. Even adjusted for opponent, they're still like in the low 30s with their offensive efficiency. So not terrible, but not an overly efficient offense. But they are explosive in terms of generating 30, 40 plus yard plays. They're one of the more explosive offenses, not just in the SEC, but in the entire country. But I would also say this, like I'm digging deep trying to find causes for concern, guys. Like I want to give you a comprehensive look at this, and I know that Georgia fans have this mindset that Georgia's given up a ton of explosive plays in the passing game this year, and there have certainly been some high-profile moments. Tennessee game first half stands out. There are a couple plays against Florida where they got behind us and we blew some assignments and just kind of busted there in the back end. It almost cost us the game there in the fourth quarter, late in the game, right? And fortunately, the ball hit the ground. And yes, it hit the ground. I don't care what anyone says. The ball hit the ground there. So I know there's some high-profile moments where that's happened this year, and it's kind of like recency bias, where that's fresh in your mind from what happened we saw a couple of days ago against Florida in Jacksonville. But contrary to what a lot of fans, the Georgia fan base, feel like, and contrary to what it might seem like, Georgia actually throughout the year has not given up all that many explosive plays. Even against Alabama, like they converted like almost every third down, but they weren't generating a ton of explosive plays. Tennessee did in the first half of that game. Second half, not so much. Kentucky they're almost helpless offensively. They've gotten better offensively, but when we played them, they were essentially helpless offensively. All we know is utterly helpless offensively. They already fired their coach. Dreadful. 3 points against Kentucky at home at night. Crazy, crazy stuff. So there has been the reality that we play some opponents that aren't especially competent offensively and just cannot generate explosive plays. But we have played some explosive teams, and like Ole Miss, when we played them, guys, was the most explosive team in the country coming into that game. And yeah, they put up 5 touchdowns on 5 drives, but they also didn't generate a ton of like overly explosive plays. They were just really efficient in those first 5 drives. But if you look at our numbers, guys, statistically, we haven't really given up all that many explosive plays this season. We are top 3 in the SEC, in top 20 nationally in both plays of 30 or more and plays of 40 or more yards surrendered. We're not giving up a ton of chunk plays. I think it's one of the situations where it's been a couple of high-profile situations where it kind of stood out to us, where it's like, oh my God, like creates this perception. We're just like, we can't stop the pass, man. Like, we're going to chunk play after chunk play in the passing game. But that really has been the case. What's happened is that we have busted from time to time. And I do think that's kind of weighing more heavily on our mind than what the stats actually tell us. But I will say this. Even though on a down by down basis, we have done a good job, a game by game basis of limiting explosive plays, at least from a statistical standpoint, those busts have happened. We saw it against Tennessee. We saw it some last week, guys, right? Even Kentucky hit a couple big plays. The tight end, the touch on the tight end was a big play. It should never have happened, right? And at that time, Kentucky wasn't able to do anything offensively. And Mississippi State is very capable of generating explosive plays. Again, they are an explosive offense. Not efficient, but they're an explosive offense. And all it takes is 1 or 2 explosive plays for an underdog like Mississippi State to change a football game. If they create one play here, one play there explosively, all of a sudden they can get the crowd involved, and all of a sudden they changes the entire dynamic of a football game. So we have been statistically good all season long in totality of limiting opponents' explosive plays, but you can't have those busts like we saw. Now KJ will be back this game. Fortunately, when he got got thrown out of the game for targeting last week. That was right before the half. So he served his time. He's back this week. We'll not have to miss the first half. So hopefully that will help. We don't have 2 guys out there that haven't played that much football for Georgia in the back end. I thought Zion Brett did some good things, but also there's a bust or 2 back there. Just hasn't played that much for Georgia. So it's going to be really nice to have KJ back there in the secondary. Love that. But we just can't bust, guys. If we don't bust, I think we've got a good shot to limit the explosiveness of this Mississippi State passing attack, especially with our ability to stop the run game and play that 2 high safety shell. But again, all bets are off. All bets are off if you bust assignments back there, guys. If you blow assignments, who knows what's going to happen? And 1 or 2 explosive plays, absolutely on the road, can change that dynamic of football game. So absolutely something to watch out for here in this game. And finally, guys, my one player to watch, a guy on the Georgia roster I think is going to have a big game for Georgia. I'm going to go running back Nate Frazier. Now, it's not the first time he's made this list. I think he was the guy I pinpointed going back to the Ole Miss game a couple weeks back as a player to watch. It's for similar reasons, guys. I'm not telling you right now that Nate Frazier is better than Chauncey Bones. In fact, you go back and you watch my recap episode from earlier in the week. I've said it many times this year. Chauncey Bones is the best back on the Georgia football team right now. But it's also pretty clear right now that Chauncey Bones is not 100%. He's not, right? Guy only got 9 carries against Florida. Really didn't see much time, like real meaningful snaps until the second half of that football game. Very limited snaps in the first half of that game. So Chauncey, if you remember, go back to the Auburn game, scores touchdown in the second half. But in the fourth quarter, when it's crunch time, we're trying to ice that game away. We didn't have him on the field. Our best back was not on the field. And that was kind of eye-opening for me. Like, something's going on here. And so I had heard coming to Mississippi State, or the Ole Miss game, that he was a little banged up, and like we don't know how much we're going to be able to get from him. He did give us something in that game, but Nate was also the guy who started that football game. I was hopeful coming out of the bye week that he'd be good to go and fully healed. But again, like when he played sparingly in the first half, and only got 9 carries total in a game that was a very tight game. You need your best back on the field as much as possible. That tells me there's something going on there. Now, what I've heard is there's a calf strain that we're trying to deal with. I don't know if that's 100% certain, like what's happening here, but that's kind of what I've heard. We'll see if that's the factor. Like maybe more come out on that later on. But it seems pretty clear that he is not 100% healthy here right now. So what does that mean? Well, guys, we're going to run the football on Saturday. Like, again, it is too big of a matchup advantage for Georgia to ignore. We have got to run the football. And right now, Nate is of the top backs, of the top 2 with him and Chauncey, he's the healthier back. So I think he's going to get more. I think Chauncey's going to carry the football because we're going to need him to carry the football in this game. But I think Nate is going to start again. I think Nate's going to get the lion's share of the carries once again. And I think Nate is continuing to improve, guys. Like, he's so physically gifted. and he's learning more and more the nuances of playing that position. He's becoming more patient. He's seeing the field better than he had. Certainly as a freshman, in the early parts of this year, where sometimes we just take the ball, just kind of like ram it into the offensive lineman's back and not really have any idea what he wants to do with it. He's just trying to run 100 miles an hour. He's doing a much better job in those parts of the game. He's also giving us some help out of the backfield in the passing game as well. So Nate's really improving. And with him taking those strides, and again, I think going to be the guy that's going to get the lion's share of the carries in this game. I'm looking for Nate Frazier to, I don't know if I'm going to go as far as say run wild, but I'm looking for Nate Frazier to have a big game against this very, very suspect Mississippi State run defense. But all right, guys, that is my deep dive preview of this match between the Bulldogs on Saturday. I'll be back one more time this week with my official keys to this game, my keys to a Georgia victory, and my final score prediction for this Georgia-Mississippi State matchup. So thank you guys for being here. I greatly appreciate it. If you are a diehard Georgia fan, go ahead, subscribe right now, turn those notifications on, like the video, comment. Where's your head at, guys? Are you more concerned about this game than the average Georgia fan, or are you feeling good about it? Where are you? I'd love to hear from you guys. So thank you again for all your support. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.